The doctor's hands were trembling as he held the test results. Looking at Amy Winehouse's mother, Janice. "You can't tell her," Janice whispered desperately. "Promise me. Amy will never know." What happened next would haunt everyone involved until their dying day. It was March 2009, and Amy Winehouse thought she knew everything about her mother's condition. Multiple sclerosis. That's what the family had been told for years. That's what Amy cried about in private, feeling guilty for every moment she spent high or drunk while her mother suffered. But Janice Winehouse was hiding something far more devastating. A secret that would explain why she watched her daughter's self-destruction with such desperate, knowing eyes. The real story begins 18 months earlier, in a sterile hospital room where Janice sat alone, staring at medical charts she could barely understand. The words Huntington's disease meant nothing to her at first. Then the doctor explained, "Genetic, fatal, degenerative, 50% chance of passing it to your children." "Your daughter," the doctor said carefully, "has she shown any symptoms? Mood changes, impulsive behavior, addiction issues?" But here's what nobody knew. Janice had been watching Amy for signs since she was 14, and what she saw terrified her more than any diagnosis. Janice's mind raced back through the years. Amy's explosive temper as a teenager. Was that just rebellion, or something darker? The bulimia that started at 15, a teenage phase or an early symptom. The way Amy couldn't stop once she started anything, whether it was singing, drinking, or loving toxic men. Every mother worries, but Janice was looking for patterns that would confirm her worst nightmare. She remembered finding 13-year-old Amy in her room, writing obsessively, filling notebook after notebook with lyrics, unable to stop even when her hand cramped. "It's like something else is controlling me," Amy had said then, laughing it off. Janice had laughed too, but now that memory felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Huntington's often started with personality changes, compulsive behaviors, loss of impulse control. Everything that made Amy who she was could also be symptoms of what was killing them both. The genetic counselor had been blunt. "If you have it, each of your children has a 50% chance." Symptoms typically appear between 30 and 50, but early onset can happen in the 20s. Amy was 25. The timeline was a ticking bomb that only Janice could hear. Wait until you hear what Janice did next, because this decision would change everything about Amy's final years. Janice made a choice that would torture her for the rest of her life. She would never tell Amy. She convinced the doctors to keep the real diagnosis secret, letting everyone believe it was just MS getting worse. She watched her daughter spiral into addiction, knowing that Amy might be self-medicating symptoms she didn't even realize she had. Every time Amy stumbled on stage, every time she forgot lyrics, Janice wondered, was it the drugs and alcohol, or was it beginning? She started a secret journal, documenting everything she observed about Amy. March 15th. Amy's hands shook during dinner. Could be withdrawal or April 2nd. She couldn't remember the melody to her own song. Claimed she was tired, but May 20th. Mood swing so severe Blake called me crying. She didn't remember it the next day. Each entry was a mother's love letter wrapped in medical observations, trying to track a disease that might or might not be destroying her daughter from the inside out. Mitch, Amy's father, found the journal by accident one afternoon while looking for Janice's reading glasses. When he confronted her, Janice broke down completely. "If she knows, it will destroy her," she sobbed. "She's already so fragile. Can you imagine Amy knowing she might have a death sentence in her genes? She'll give up fighting entirely." But the most shocking part was when Amy's doctor discovered something that made him break his oath of confidentiality. Dr. Christina Rometti had been Amy's private physician for 2 years, trying everything to help her get clean. But during a routine brain scan in late 2010, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Tiny changes in the basal ganglia. Subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking for them, but unmistakable if you knew what Huntington's looked like in its earliest stages. She ran the scan 3 more times, hoping she was wrong. She called Janice immediately. You have to tell her, Dr. Rometty insisted. There are treatments that could slow the progression. She has a right to know. But Janice begged, actually got on her knees in the doctor's office, pleading for silence. She's finally getting better, Janice lied. This news will kill her faster than any disease. The doctor faced an impossible choice: honor her patient's autonomy, or respect a mother's desperate wish to protect her child from a truth that couldn't be changed. She chose silence, a decision that would haunt her after Amy's death. Every time I saw her perform, stumbling, forgetting words, I wondered if I was watching Huntington's or addiction. Dr. Rometty later confided to a colleague, and I said nothing. You won't believe what happened when Blake found out the truth by accident. Blake Fielder Civil, despite all his flaws, genuinely loved Amy in his toxic way. During one of his prison stints in 2010, he received a letter from Janice that was meant for her sister. In it, Janice had written, "I pray every day that Amy didn't inherit it from me. Sometimes I watch her on TV, and I can see myself at that age, before we knew what was wrong with my mother." The family curse continues. Blake, even in prison, didn't fully understand at first. But he had a cellmate whose brother had Huntington's, and when Blake described Amy's behavior, the mood swings, the compulsions, the increasing lack of coordination masked as drunkenness, his cellmate went pale. "Mate, that sounds exactly like my brother before he was diagnosed." Blake tried to call Amy immediately, but Janice intercepted. She promised him money, drugs, anything to keep quiet. "If you ever loved her," Janice said, "you'll let her have peace in her last years. Don't make her live in fear of something she can't control." Blake, for perhaps the only selfless moment in his life, agreed. But the knowledge ate at him. He started using more heavily, unable to cope with knowing Amy might be dying from something beyond addiction. But then something unexpected happened that almost exposed everything, until fate intervened in the cruelest way. In May 2011, just 2 months before Amy's death, a young genetic counselor named Sarah Morrison was reviewing research files for a study on Huntington's in artistic families. She came across Janice Winehouse's medical records, incorrectly filed in the public research database. Sarah was an Amy fan, and the connection hit her immediately. She saw the diagnosis, the genetic markers, the 50% chance. Sarah struggled with what to do. Medical ethics demanded patient privacy. But what if Amy didn't know? What if she could get treatment? Sarah decided to reach out anonymously, sending a letter to Amy's management suggesting she get genetic testing for a hereditary condition that might affect performers. The letter arrived at Amy's house on July 20, 2011, 3 days before her death. Amy never opened it. Her assistant found it in a pile of unopened mail weeks after the funeral. When she showed it to Mitch, he burned it immediately, preserving Janice's secret even after Amy was gone. What good would it do now? He rationalized. But privately, he wondered if knowing might have saved her, if the fear of a genetic death might have motivated Amy to fight harder against her addictions. The Belgrade concert disaster takes on a whole new meaning when you know what Janice saw that night. When Janice watched the footage of Amy's disastrous Belgrade performance in June 2011, she saw something everyone else missed. The way Amy's left foot dragged slightly, the tremor in her right hand that wasn't from withdrawal, the moment she forgot where she was entirely. Not drunk confusion, but something deeper. Janice recognized it all. She'd seen the same symptoms in her own mother 20 years earlier. That night, Janice called her sister Rachel in tears. "It's starting," she whispered. "I can see it starting." She has maybe 5 years before it becomes obvious, before she can't hide it anymore. Rachel tried to comfort her, but what comfort could there be? They were discussing a timeline for Amy's deterioration, not knowing Amy had less than 2 months to live. Janice increased her own medication, not for MS but for the crushing anxiety of carrying this secret. She started planning how she would care for Amy when the symptoms became undeniable, researching facilities, treatment, anything that might help. She even wrote Amy a letter explaining everything, to be opened when the time was right. The letter was in her purse when Amy died. What happened in Amy's final week will break your heart when you understand the full truth. On July 18, 2011, 5 days before her death, Amy had a moment of strange clarity. She called her mother at 3 a.m., unusually lucid. "Mom, is there something you're not telling me?" she asked. "About your illness? About our family?" Janice's heart stopped. Had Amy figured it out? Had someone told her? "Why would you ask that, Bubba?" Janice managed to say, using Amy's childhood nickname. Amy was quiet for a long moment. "I had a dream," she finally said. "Grandma was there, and she was trying to tell me something about our blood, our genes." She kept pointing at her head, and then at mine. Janice was crying silently on the other end. "It was just a dream, baby," she lied. "Just a dream." But Amy wasn't convinced. She spent the next day researching genetic diseases online. Her laptop history, checked after her death, showed searches for hereditary diseases, MS genetic, and horrifyingly, Huntington's disease symptoms. She was so close to the truth. But then Blake called that evening, drunk and emotional, and Amy got distracted by their 2-hour conversation about their failed love. She never returned to her research. The next day, July 20th, Amy went to see a different doctor, claiming she wanted a full medical workup. "I need to know everything," she told the receptionist. "Every test, every scan. Something's not right." But the doctor was booked solid. They scheduled her for July 25th, 2011. She would die on July 23rd, never making it to that appointment that might have revealed everything. On the morning of July 23rd, 2011, hours before Amy would take her final drinks, Janice had decided to tell her. She'd woken up with a certainty that Amy needed to know, deserved to know. She called Amy's phone repeatedly, but Amy was still asleep. Janice left a voicemail. "Amy, my love, I need to see you today. There's something important about our family, about me, about you maybe. Please call me back. I love you more than life itself." Amy never heard the message. Her phone was dead, and she'd forgotten to charge it. She spent her last day in a vodka haze, occasionally sitting at her drums, writing fragments of lyrics that made no sense. One scrap of paper found later read, "Something in my blood sings the wrong tune." Mother's lullabies were warning, but I was too high to hear them. When they found Amy that afternoon, Janice was on her way over, having decided to tell her in person. She was in the taxi when Mitch called with the news. The secret she'd carried, the truth she'd hidden, would now be buried with Amy. At the funeral, Janice looked at Amy's body and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. I thought I was protecting you. But here's the detail that changes everything." The autopsy showed early-stage neurological changes that the coroner dismissed as alcohol-related. One pathologist later reviewed the case, and noted privately that the patterns were consistent with early Huntington's markers, but said nothing publicly, respecting the family's privacy. Amy had indeed inherited her mother's curse, but she would never suffer from it. In the cruelest irony, her addiction saved her from a slower, more terrible death. Janice lived for 3 more years after Amy's death, her own condition deteriorating rapidly. Whether from Huntington's or grief, nobody could say. On her deathbed in 2014, she confessed everything to a nurse, a stranger who would never judge her. "I let my baby die, thinking she was weak," Janice whispered. "But she was sick, just like me. I should have told her she wasn't broken, just ill. Maybe if she'd known it wasn't her fault." The nurse held Janice's hand as she cried. "You loved her," the nurse said simply. "Love makes us do impossible things." Janice died that night, taking the full truth with her. The family still maintains she had MS. Amy's death certificate still lists alcohol poisoning. But somewhere in medical files, that will never be made public, the evidence remains. Amy Winehouse was dying long before she actually died. Would knowing have saved Amy? Would the diagnosis have given her the strength to fight her addictions, knowing she had limited time? Or would it have accelerated her self-destruction, making her give up entirely? These questions torment everyone who knew the truth. Dr. Romiti left medicine entirely. unable to reconcile her silence with her oath to do no harm. Blake got clean briefly after Amy's death, haunted by the secret he'd kept. In rehab, he told his counselor about the genetic disease, about Janice's plea for silence. The counselor asked him, "Do you think Amy sensed something was wrong with her? Is that why she drank?" Blake broke down completely. "She always said she felt like there was something dark inside her, something broken in her DNA. She was right, and I knew it, and I said nothing." Today, when people analyze Amy's performances, looking for signs of her impending death, they focus on the drugs, the alcohol, the heartbreak. They don't see what Janice saw, the subtle neurological symptoms hidden beneath the addiction. They don't know that Amy's famous words, "I don't want to die," took on a different meaning for those who knew about the genetic sword hanging over her head. In her final interview, Amy said something that in retrospect seems prophetic. "Sometimes I feel like my body is betraying me from the inside out, like there's something in my blood that wants me dead." The interviewer assumed she meant addiction, but maybe somehow, Amy knew. Maybe on some cellular level, she could feel the disease lurking in her genes, the inheritance her mother tried so desperately to hide. What would you have done in Janice's position? Would you have told your child they might be carrying a death sentence in their DNA? Or would you have done what Janice did, carried that terrible knowledge alone, hoping love could somehow overcome genetics? There's no right answer, only the crushing weight of a mother's impossible choice, and a daughter who died never knowing the truth about herself. Amy Winehouse didn't just die of alcohol poisoning. She died of a genetic legacy, a family secret, and a mother's desperate love that manifested as silence. She was never the mess everyone thought she was. She was a girl whose brain was betraying her, self-medicating a disease she didn't know she had, fighting an enemy she couldn't see. In the end, the vodka killed her before Huntington's could. Some would call that merciful. Janice called it her greatest failure as a mother. Rest in peace, Amy. The truth is finally told, even if you never got to hear it.